Hello, my fellow webheads. It's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you again today to talk about more Amazing Spider-Man. First of all, I just again want to thank everybody who's been following this series since the beginning and have been watching the videos. It's been great. We're making terrific progress on our goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2026. And we're also getting a lot more views on the videos lately, and that's all attributed to you, the folks who are following, watching, and making this a community. So thank you so much, everybody who's participating and enjoying the videos. Thank you so much. If you really are enjoying the content here, make sure you're sharing it with your friends. Let them know. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and hit that notification bell. That said, of course, I want to remind anybody who's new, we are giving away art. That's right. When we reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, we will do drawings of lucky subscribers who will win art for free. There's no purchase necessary. Even the shipping will be free. You could win this amazing Spider-Man piece by yours truly. You could win this Incredible Hulk piece, celebrating my Incredible Hulk series that we do here on the channel, as well as this Uncanny X-Men original team piece in their original team costumes. This is a more recent addition to the channel where we're looking at the X-Men starting with issue number 1. There's been a lot of really great feedback there and views on those videos. So again, thank you. And if you're interested in winning that original art, make sure you do subscribe and then be on the lookout for even more. We've got more review streams, more review series coming up, which means also more art to go with them. So that being said, we're going to, like I said, talk about Amazing Spider-Man 67. It's hard to believe that we're this far into the series already. It seems like we just started yesterday. But that all said, let's cut over and jump right into it. So this is the cover to the Amazing Spider-Man number 67. It is a John Romita cover, and it is very cool and very eye-catching. Obviously, there's great peril, which is one of the things that you want in an attractive cover. The cover needs to tease us or tantalize us to make us want to open this book to see what happens. So this is great. We've got Spidey in these giant Mysterio hands. So just a quick recap from the previous issue. Mysterio's returned. He has a plan to finally defeat Spider-Man. He calls him out. Spidey takes the bait, if you will, or he, goes to the trap knowing it's a trap. And at the end, it looks like he has been shrunk down to about 6 inches tall and put into a miniature carnival or amusement park. And Mysterio is giant size and normal and looks like he's finally going to get his revenge. So you've got that cover here exploring that, which is great. One of the things that I don't talk about a ton sometimes. I mean, we do talk about the coloring and we talk about color choices. But one of the things they've really done here is used the color extremely well. Not just, you have Spidey and you have a green character. We've talked a lot about the juxtaposition of primary colors like red and blue against secondary colors like green and purple. But what I really want to talk about here is the lighting. So the way that it's drawn, the black lines are the drawing. And it is definitely drawn to show that there's a pretty significant light source coming from below. That's why the back of the hand and the knuckles are all in shadow, whereas the front and the palm is more lit up. Now, you could have just colored this straight green and you allow the black inks to set the tone for the shadow. But what they've done here is added this yellow tone to really highlight the highlights, or that shine of the light hitting that palm to really help separate the really bright area from the dark area. And it's extremely effective. Again, remember, this is at a time when printing was not coloring and printing, which in my mind are completely linked together, right? Those two things were not like they are today with Photoshop, with computers, with computer printing. It was old school. Somebody had to come in and paint the original, which they called a color guide. And then people would have to make the templates for the color so that when they pass through, you don't want any of the blue or magenta hitting this area. You want yellow. So when the blue and magenta passes go over the paper, this needs to be blocked off. Then you have to pass it through again under the yellow, and that way it's going to apply just that yellow. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of forethought, and it's very easy for things to get what they call off register, which means every time you pass it through, you run the risk of your paper or your printer being slightly offline, and now your colors don't line up where they're supposed to. We see that quite often in the interior of the pages, but the cover obviously is very, very important. So again, just real quick, I wanted to touch a base and emphasize the fact that this coloring technique on the hands is not easy and was done extremely successfully here on this cover. There's two other very quick things I want to cover before we get in there. One is just the signature. So you see here that says Romita over here between the fingers. We've seen some cover signatures, but it was not like it is today where every artist has their signature, and that could be a stylized symbol, a stylized way of writing their name, and it's very prominent on the covers so that you know who the artist is. Back then, if you had a signature, it was very subtle. You know, I think about the other series that we're doing here, like, for example, the X-Men. It's, the early issues we've looked at, like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. It's drawn by Jack Kirby. I don't think it says the word Kirby or Jack or anything on those covers. We know it is, but it's not written on the cover like we have now. So that's a change just in philosophy, I guess, if you will, about an artist being like, it's not just that, I'm not just drawing it for a paycheck. Hey, I want people to know that's me. And it kind of helps it take on more, especially with the original art, as a piece of art. Just like a painter would sign their painting, the artists were being more deliberate with signing their covers. And then the last thing I want to talk about is this background. So this dot pattern that you see here, which is a little different on the screen perhaps, but it is just kind of dots. Let me zoom in and see if it clears up that pattern. It's what's called a moire pattern. There we go. So that's what it looks like. So it's darker at the top and fades down into fewer and fewer dots to where it then kind of fades out at the bottom. This is done, and you can see there's a slight mistake here. They missed this little gap between the thumb and finger right here. This should be the same as this. How does that happen? That's because this is called zipatone. I've talked about it, I believe, in the past, and I'm going to show you a couple pictures here. These are the best that I could find on the internet to kind of explain or visually show what zipatone is. Nowadays, it's just recreated with Photoshop brushes, so it's much harder to show you the original. But basically, it's a sticky adhesive, and this dot pattern is already created on that sheet. You lay it down over the art. You cut out the areas you don't want the pattern to be in, and then you peel those away, leaving the dot pattern where you want it. And it could be a dot pattern, it could be a crosshatch pattern, it could be circles. There's all kinds of different patterns you could use. But if you're looking here at the cover again, you could see, so that's what would have happened. Everything, the title could have been pasted across the top possibly, but definitely all the hand was cut out. Everything around Spidey would have been cut out. And then what happens is they cut around this hand on the left and they just miss this little triangle. And you would have had to have just that little triangle of sticky zipatone over the top there in order to do that. Zipatone, like I said, it can be replicated today with Photoshop brushes. And you will find sometimes people who do more black and white art, or people who are looking for a more retro style might replicate this with Photoshop. But the art of sticking Zipatone to a page and cutting away is definitely a lost art. I really like the look. Again, it's very nostalgic. I don't know that it fits everywhere in modern comics, but there are places where I think it can be really useful, and I'd like to see it make a comeback. But anyway, that's the bits on the title there. On the cover. Let's open it up and look inside. As I always tell you at this stage of the game, we are looking at a scanned PDF copy of this comic. So this comic is from 1968. So you will see the original ads, the paper quality. If there is a misalignment of the color, you will see that. But it's the most accurate to the original book that you're able to find today. If you go on a digital platform and look at this comic, it's most likely going to be digitally recolored or sort of at least cleaned up digitally, which is not what we're looking for. That's one of the things I love about this, is we see it as it was from 1968. Very quickly, we'll talk about the team here. We still have Stan Lee on writing, of course. John Romita is considered in this case of these credits, the artist. I'm going to say John Romita is the penciler. It's hard to say based on these titles, but they have Jim Mooney as, they say, embellisher. Typically, when someone says they're the artist, what they mean is they're the penciler, and they probably would have provided complete pencils. However, when it says embellisher, it could mean inker, or it could mean finisher. We've talked about this a whole bunch of times on the channel. You'll see this in a bunch of videos if you go back and check these out. But basically, very quickly, the difference between an inker and an embellisher, or inker and finisher, is how detailed are the pencils. If the pencil work that I have to ink over has every single detail, like these hatching around the knuckles and the wrinkles on the glove and the shading on Spidey's leg and all the lines from the action and the explosion, if all of that is penciled in and all I have to do is go in and add thickness, transitions from light to dark, and choose maybe spotting where, maybe I want to add a little more black to an area that wasn't shaded that way in the pencils, that's inking. Finishing means it's just a roughly drawn hand. No real shading, maybe just the very black areas, and then the finisher has to figure out, how am I going to transition? If this under the thumb is all black, how do I transition to the palm below? Or there's a shadow, or maybe there isn't. It's just the body. It's just, there's no details of the costume. So the finisher would have to be able to know how Spidey's costume goes. And maybe there's just that shadow under the leg, and the finisher decides to feather that out and continue it down the back of the hamstring. So those are the differences. So I'm not 100% sure in this particular issue if John Romita did complete pencils or not. And I say that because in the previous issue, we were still dealing with the triple team, meaning John Romita was doing roughs and or layouts, or layouts and or roughs. Don Heck was finishing those pencils, tightening them up for the inker, and then the inker was Mike Esposito, who was then just, again, as I mentioned, just inking, meaning I'm thickening up lines where there's shadow, giving line weight, and just rendering out what the artist has already put there. So the fact that there's only two artists here makes me say that either Jim Mooney was an incredible finisher, it could really mimic John Romita's art style, or John Romita had the time and was able to provide tight finish pencils here. Anyway, that's that. The splash page is awesome. This is great action start. So we finished with Spidey being, in the previous issue, being 6 inches tall and standing on this model of a amusement park as Mysterio loomed over him. We turn the page and boom, that giant fist is crashing down. It's terrific. The fist is drawn very well. The form and the knuckles and all that is terrific. The shading on it works excellently. This pose of Spidey leaping away is terrific. His lower body is twisting in an opposite direction of his upper body, which brings action to the form. That's excellent. The shading is very nice. You've got light coming from, I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to say kind of above and behind Spidey, maybe, because his hips, basically, his pelvis is casting a shadow over this leg. There's shadow on the outside in the arm here. There's a little bit on this, but I guess it's trying to just transition that curve of the calf. But really great shading. Everything is terrific. The action lines are great. This is a great way to jump into a splash page in a story. And then there's one really subtle thing here that's super important, and that is the overlap. There is the slightest overlap of Spidey in front of this giant fist. That is the key to this whole page. If you move Spidey an inch to the left and there is no overlapping between him and this giant fist, it completely confuses the scale of the two things. You would then think the fist is maybe way in the foreground and Spidey is small behind it. It wouldn't show what we see here, which is this fist is gigantic in relation to Spider-Man's size. And that overlapping is what does it. So again, remember, if you want to show depth on a two-dimensional plane, which is the illusion that we're crafting here, one of the best ways you can do that is with size. Something that's large is typically, our brain says, that's closer to me. Something that's small, the smaller it is, the further away it is. It's very simple. This photograph on the left, I've never really talked about these in this term before, but this is a great example. You have three figures here on the left. You have figures back in the right. They're not overlapping it any way, but we know the figures, our brain says these people are closer than these people, or bigger. That tells me they're closer. These people are higher up on the page as well. These people are lower in the image. That also tells me that they're closer. So that's how you can do it without overlapping. But in a page like this, the best way to do it is this very subtle overlapping. And again, that is the key to the whole thing, and it's fantastic. We're going to talk about this throughout, but let me touch on it real quick. This has probably to date one of the most, I'll air quote, modern visual storytelling approaches that we've seen in this series. What I mean by that is the panels when Spidey is fighting Mysterio, for the most part, are very large, very open, and you're not going to see more than 4 or 5 panels per page at most. Now, I compared this to some modern comics that I have recently purchased. So at the time of this recording, there's a book that's coming out of Image Comics called Dork, D'_ORC. It is a kind of fantasy, swords and sorcery kind of book that's really, really hot right now. I looked at several issues of Dork, and the most panels that are on a page, even when people are just sort of talking, is 5. I looked at a recent issue of X-Men from Marvel. Same thing. You're not going to see more than 4 or 5 panels on a page at a time. This gives everyone a larger space and more area to breathe with the figures in the panel. And that's what we've got here. So one, that's just a style critique or note from me. The other thing that it does is the space gives us the opportunity to have both large Mysterio and small Spidey in the same image, and really emphasizing the fact that Spider-Man is small in comparison to his background and Mysterio himself. So that's a great, again, visual way. If you did 9-panel grid on here, you wouldn't have the space to show the scale difference. It would be really, really hard because every panel would be so small. So that is absolutely terrific. I love these panels. I love these images. Spidey is great here. This is a terrific figure. I said the same thing here on the right-hand side on page 3. the anatomy is perfect. He's muscular without being bulky, but he's not too thin. The things like this upshot is superb. I mean, this is picture perfect. If you want to show somebody how you draw Spidey looking up, the shadow under the chin and neck is great. The way that the top of his pectoral muscle overlaps that, because it comes out, right? He's got muscle and we're looking up at him, and so you can't see like his collarbone and where his neck joins. I mean, just perfect. Lifting the eyes up higher on the head so you see more of the lower of the face because it's tilted away. That is your perspective and your foreshortening of that face. Excellent, excellent stuff. The hand, the little grasping hand, just awesome. All of these figures throughout the page look really, really good. Everybody is on the top of their game for the most part with this comic. There's a couple of spots. We're coming up on one, and I'll show you here. So this I thought was kind of strange. So Spidey is trying to fight back, right? Mysterio's trying to grab him, trying to crush him. Every time Spidey is going to attack him back, he turns into smoke and disappears. Then he shows up again and nearly, clobbers him with this fist. And he says, you dodged just in time. It felt like a missile zooming past. But Mysterio's just toying with him. So he doesn't get hit here. But if you look at this image feels like a guy who just got knocked down. And it makes me wonder if maybe that was the original idea just in terms of what John Romita was drawing from the plot. So maybe in this panel, he's supposed to sort of get clipped and knocked down, stunned maybe. And Mysterio's like, I'm coming in for the kill. And Spidey flips out of the way at the last moment. But the dialogue here in this panel seems off compared to the imagery. This looks like, this image of Spidey here looks like a man in trouble, physically struggling, where it doesn't match what happened. And then there's a lot of negative space around. So if, to make Mysterio more menacing, I would think you would want to close in the gap. However, so it makes me wonder if maybe there was supposed to be more dialogue there or something to that effect. But we've talked about this in the series a lot. The Marvel method allows for the artist to take the plot, which is your general story through line, your theme, draw it the way they see it with some feedback and notes. And then Stan or somebody, whoever was writing, would come in and write that dialogue. And if you thought, as the artist, so this punch comes in, he can't quite duck in time, it knocks him down, but Stan doesn't read it the same way or whatever, sometimes those things don't align. It's just the way it goes. But the rest of it's great. Getting out of the way is terrific. Good action lines, Spidey moving around. It's awesome. And then this is really cool. This is almost a splash page. I mean, it's 2/3 of the page, which is really, really cool. So Spidey goes to duck away and ends up in a hall of mirrors. I love the different Spidey drawings in each mirror and how they change angle. That's really nice. And there's also, we're going to zoom in, there's a very subtle coloring difference. And again, so coloring super on point so far with this, with the comic. So this is obviously the real Spidey we see in front of us. And every one of his images has a little bit of a sort of pink on the red. So whether that's here, and I suppose that the idea is it's helping us understand that it's visually helping us understand these are his reflections, but also maybe it's light, supposed to be light bouncing off the glass, and so it's lightening the color in the reflections a little bit. But it's to me, I don't have any problem with it. I'm very clear what's happening here. I think it's great. Even the Spidey that's in the middle of the mirrors with his back to us, that the pose that he's in is very, very nice. So yeah, I'm really happy with that picture. Um, One other thing, just real quick, we see it a lot on the next page. It's here as well. Let's just go back very quickly and see. I don't see anything here. Okay. So here is probably the first one where we see his hand is in shadow, but you see the web pattern on the back of the hand in red. Um, and then we see that again over here as the mirrors start to close in on him. And we see more of that. Him in shadow with the lines being held out and colored in red. That's a great technique. I love seeing it. It's a way to give... So it's a way to shade because you only had certain number of tones. And dark red, you can't just add black to red to make it darker. It just turns it muddy and gross. So dark red isn't really just black added to red. Typically, you would add maybe some blue and start to head into the purple tones, things of that nature to kind of darken it down. They just didn't have the subtlety in printing technique that we have, again, today. Like I said, we can print in literally millions, if not billions of colors. They had a limit. So how do you address that? Well, you use your black ink for shading, which is terrific, but you don't want to lose the design. And so you just draw those lines out in white, basically. And so when they pass over the color, you color everything red, and the white lines take the red ink. And there you go. It's a great technique. I love it a lot. I love seeing it, and we see it a few times in this issue. This is a great transition here. I've always complained about John Romita's transitions, where he's got this scene and he cuts from one scene at the very end of the page to another scene that's completely unrelated. So Peter Spidey is in trouble. It sounds like he's in big trouble because the mirrors are coated in poison, and if they break and cut him, he'll die, according to Mysterio. So he's struggling. He's in dark shadow. Things are closing in around him. And then we cut to this image of Aunt May waking up in terror. Somehow she's worried about Peter. Then again, call it ESP, call it a coincidence, whatever. But this to me has it's not so much a true visual connection, but a thematic connection. And the hard shadows here with the lighting does tie in with the hard shadows and the lighting on Spidey. So to me, this is actually a very good transition. And I'm in my notes here, I said this face is great. Oh, also the spider sense flaring, terrific stuff. The face is right out of a classic, I said Eerie or House of Mystery or any of those like horror comic books. This is right out of there with that very dramatic lighting, the huge eyes and terror, like even the background, this sort of wavy going from black to this dark red. Awesome stuff. You could pull this image right out of this panel and, like I said, plop it into one of those classic old horror comics and it would fit in perfectly. That is great. So basically what we find out here is Aunt May is still not doing well. She's very weak, and every time she gets herself worked up about what's happening with Peter, it makes her sicker and sicker, according to her doctor. Now, we went from here, 3 panels, to now, here we are, 2, 5, 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So as we get into more talking heads, we get back to the a lot of panels per page. But that said, we're still moving the camera around. And as I always remind everybody, the camera is the eyes of the viewer in relation to the objects on the page. We can't truly move the page around. So we move the image and it appears like we're moving a camera through space. And they've done that terrifically here. The team is great. Looking through the door. Now we flip around. We look behind the doctor. Now we're a little bit further. Now we're using Aunt May as a framing device as the doctor walks out. All of it very, very nice. Excuse me. We cut to the Daily Bugle, and Jonah's on his normal rants, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with Spider-Man and Mysterio. There's been no word. So just a little cut to remind us, like, hey, don't forget the Daily Bugle is a big part of Spidey's life. And now we cut back to the battle, and he's trying to figure out a way to get out of this trap. So, of course, webbing does everything. He can use it to gum up the mechanism so that the gives him more time. The mirrors aren't coming at him quite so fast. And then he makes these big web pads for his arms so that he can use his forearms to smash through the glass without cutting himself. Again, very subtle. But notice again, here's that technique, right? You could have just made this black. That would have been fine. Or you could have made the red belt and just colored it in. We would have been okay. But to show that the lighting is really dim, we've gone ahead with that technique again. And the belt is drawn in white. And then when they put the red coloring over the top, boom. And the term that we use today is called a color hold. Your lines are being printed in color versus the ink that you use to draw them. So he does it, and we see it again here on the leg, which again, it's in some more here as well. So great technique to show Spidey in the shadows without just blacking out the whole costume. So awesome stuff there. He falls into water, and then he says he's being pulled down. This panel here doesn't feel watery to me. So he dives, and you kind of see, I guess, it looks maybe a little like waves and some bubbles, kind of. But I can't tell, because this here, as he's flailing around, to me, let's zoom back out, and just real quick to go backwards, looks very much like this one here, right? This sort of gray, swirly lines, white or blue. And this is supposed to be like mist and smoke. It kind of looks very similar. Now, as we turn the page, this is water. And the bubbles help sell the water. That is phenomenal. Combined with the nice lines of the swirls of the current and stuff, great. And when he breaks the surface, excellent splash coming up. This is a terrific way to show underwater. The only thing that I would do different, which we've seen in older Spidey comics when he's been underwater, is you could have used all shades of blue while he's under, and then when he breaks the surface, you come back to color. A choice, and I'm not unhappy with this. The bubbles, the swirls, everything sells it enough to let me know, hey, this is definitely water. Now, one other thing about this book that I haven't really called out yet. It's not clear everywhere. A lot of these pages you have like this. Normal rectangular or square panels with, standard gutters in between. Then you have a couple of pages like this where it's a more artistic composition. It's a more creative composition. Right? So Spidey's leaping at Mysterio and puffing through smoke as he disappears. Give him a nice wide panel, but the angle is an interesting choice, and it doesn't hurt anything. It just creates, again, some unique views that are a little bit different from this standard rigid, everything is parallel or perpendicular kind of panels. And now we have this same kind of thing, moving us through in a nice Z form, which is terrific. But just kind of putting everything on an angle is a neat choice and really works well. It gives us one of the things as well is anytime you work diagonally across a page like that, it's rectangular, that's going to give us the longest, most real estate to work with. So when you have pictures, images of like this, your hero, in this case Spidey, stretched out, reaching, stretching, whatever, you want to use as much real estate as possible. And if you've just gone straight up and down, there might not have been as much room. So this is a nice way to maximize the space overall. And again, another just classic upshot here of Spidey coming out of the water. absolutely awesome. The shading under the chin is what really sells it, right? It really sells the tipping of the head back. That's great stuff. So now he's into more like a I don't know what you call it. It's like it'd be amusement kind of ride. You'd be riding on a boat. Imagine like the Pirates of the Caribbean, but it's supposed to be more horror based. But in this case, everything's actually trying to kill him. So what they did here, they wanted the axe to be black because it's coming out of the shadows, but his spider sense is going off and warning him. So if you color the axe black and you color the area behind it black, you wouldn't be able to see it at all. So the choice here was to do sort of a fading crosshatch from the top down and then transition to this dark blue background. In my opinion, I think you could have just gone with the dark blue background all the way up. I think that would have been fine. The hatching's all right, but the way it just sort of stops midway is it's a little jarring. Where, over here, this transition from shadow to yellow is not so bad. It works, I guess. This one, I don't know as it worked quite as well. But the axe is great. This Spidey diving out of the way is great. I do have one pet peeve about this. Over here, while he's underwater, he's trying to figure out what's going on. His brain is running 1,000,000 miles an hour, and he's got a lot of thought balloons. Here, he jumps back down in the water. We could tell because we see all the bubbles in the water, but he's talking out loud. These should be thought balloons, right? Because you can't speak out loud underwater unless you're Aquaman or Namor or somebody like that. So doesn't work, but he uses the mechanism to pull himself out of the water and stick to the wall. These are just awesome. Every panel here is great. Sticking to the wall. This shot is just top notch. It's basically the same pose as this, right? This is from the side, and this is just us looking up at him. So you've got more of the overlapping, the foreshortening on the body, the head overlapping the neck and the shoulders. But just great. And he's even got the water dripping off him. Like, this pose is cool. You could take this out of this panel, blow it up, and it would be great on merchandise. This could be a t-shirt. This could be a notebook, a lunchbox. I mean, this just Spidey on a wall looking at you pose is phenomenal. And then you cut down here, and I really like this shadow. I like him in the dark shadow like that as Mysterio rips open the top of this carnival ride. So you have this super bright light coming in, which means that everything on the other side of the light is going to be extremely dark because it's a super bright light. So I think that's great. I mean, like I said, it's just awesome. And it continues through. You see, as this monster grabs him and lifts him towards the light, more of him is exposed in the light, but the parts that aren't, the back of his legs, the bottom of his feet, stuff like that, is still in really dark shadow, even over to the next couple panels. Really, really good stuff. I mean, it's just terrific. This one here, yeah, the body posture sells. So when you have your character in peril, there's a couple things that you can do. The most common and obvious thing to do is to emphasize the peril or the pain or the struggle through their facial expressions, right? If you're really showing a lot of pain in that face, then the reader is going to feel it. The problem is Spidey has no face. Not an expressive face, at least. So how do you sell that this thing is crushing him and that he's struggling? The body posture, how far the head is kicked back, how tight the hand is pulling against the claws wrapped around him, the way that the arch in the back comes all the way around and that the feet are even further back than the head. That body posture tells us everything we need to know, even though we can't see the struggle on his face. So I think that's awesome. And then here you see it. The other part is, like, we're still seeing it here. The hands. Your hands can be sometimes as expressive as eyes, mouth, etc. So seeing this, we know that Spidey's super strong. We know that Spidey can lift cars and stuff like that. And so for him to have to be pulling and seeing that tension in those hands is awesome. I will say this. He has this speech here. I'm not going to go into it too deep, but about, persevering and not giving up and stuff like that. I was like, it's a little high-handed for the moment that we're in. In my opinion, that's just a writing issue. I mean, he's being squeezed by this fake reptile creature in a fake amusement park, and he's talking about, the philosophy of, how nobody should fall without a struggle. And I mean, so just a little like, this is maybe not the time for that kind of speech, but so be it. But great stuff there. Mysterio tries again, can't quite get him, and Spidey is trying to think of what to do. He needs time, but Mysterio doesn't give him time. He keeps after him and after him, so Spidey doesn't have time to stop and think. But again, great pose there, hanging on the pillar of the, I guess it's the structure of the roller coaster. Great stuff there. Looks terrific. And I said, yeah, nice zoom out. So we go from big Spidey, because the emphasis is all about him on it in his hands and pulling what's wrapped around him. And the instant he frees himself, now the camera zooms out because we realize the threat is bigger. It's Mysterio and everything else. So that's a nice focus change from our main character to our overall scenario and environment. This is a classic bad transition that I do not like. There's no reason to have this one panel here on this page. You could certainly continue it on the next page and just start with a new scene. There's no visual transition between Spidey hanging on this pole and Captain Stacy answering the phone. I mean, it just doesn't exist. So not a great transition there. Joe Robertson from the Daily Bugle is calling Captain Stacy to see if he knows anything about what's going on with Mysterio and Spidey, because Mysterio made it very clear that he was looking for Spider-Man once and for all. And then we have a brand new character. This is the first appearance of Randy Robertson. This is Robbie's son. And he will stick around for quite some time. Randy's kind of in and out of Peter's life throughout the series. And so there we go. There's a big first appearance of Randy Robertson. And then we cut back to Spidey. And again, the transition is not great. Well, I say visually the transition isn't great. There is a little dialogue bit here. So Randy's coming because he says he's got a problem and he wants to talk to his dad about it. And his dad says, hey, it's better to talk about problems than wait until they become big problems, big ones. And now we cut and there's Mysterio and he's giant, right? And Spidey's itty bitty. So there's a little bit there. Visually, there isn't the transition I would be looking for, but you've got to really be on the dialogue and kind of catch the joke. So Mysterio's like, this is it. We're going for the big kill here. And Spidey's like, okay, got to keep going. Got to keep moving. For some reason, every time, he knows that Mysterio's about tricks. And so he's like, every time I get near him, he disappears. There's got to be something. This has to be fake. This has to be a trick. Interesting. So he uses this giant knife as like a little catapult to fling himself at Mysterio, who of course disappears again. And he's like, yeah, there is no giant Mysterio. It's an illusion. It's fake. And he finds where the real Mysterio is running everything from the actual real amusement park. So it was real. One thing here, little tip. we missed the crossing pattern on Mysterio. So, right, it should be an X, a cross hatch pattern. Somebody forgot to go back and see it on that shoulder there, but kind of, whoops, forgot it over here. Not a big deal, just something I noticed. Oh, one other thing, I did want to mention this. So there's a term in comics, and I belong to a number of comic book social media groups that look for these things that are called swipes. So a swipe is when, if I was to draw a character, so I had a new, it could be the same character, but let's pretend for a minute. I create my own character that is Tarantula Man instead of Spider-Man. And I took this image over here of Spider-Man, and I copied it line for line, and I just changed the costume to be Tarantula Man. Somebody can come and go, hey, you swiped this image and reused it for yourself instead of coming up with your own original image. It's something that lots of people do at one time or another. If you give credit to the original artist, then it's considered an homage. Maybe you're doing it for a true story point or something. You're referencing, especially if you're working with the same character, you're referencing back to that moment, and you can recreate that pose, and then you credit the original artist, you're fine. If you don't do it, it's called a swipe. Now, can an artist swipe themselves? Hard to say. Lots of artists will reuse poses. It's very common. But I just want to point this out real quick. The image of Spidey dodging the giant knife is exactly the same image from our splash page. So keep this in your mind right here. And now we'll go very quickly back to the splash page. And you see the same exact picture. This arm's in shadow. They're twisted. This leg's coming forward. You see the bottom of the foot. This foot's going back. The head is looking over what would be his left shoulder. And we'll zoom in. Arms in shadow, looking over the left shoulder. This leg coming forward. The shadow under here from the pelvis, from the hips. See the bottom of the foot in shadow. This foot's going away. It's exactly the same pose. It's very possible. It would have been a lot of work back then to do it. To say, I'm going to take that first image, I'm going to make a copy of it, I'm going to shrink it down on a photocopier, then I'm going to trace it here, is a little weird. It might have just been he looked at it and referenced it. It's hard to say, but it's definitely the same exact pose. Spidey finds Mysterio and gets after him right away. Mysterio has more tricks up his sleeve. He's electrified his cloak so that he can burn through the webbing. So Spidey says enough with that, and he just flat out lays him out. Great punch here. We don't see a ton of Spidey really big punches. In fact, he even mentions here, because of Mysterio's helmet, Spidey was able to let loose and really punch without holding back, which he was able to knock him out. And then they burn Mysterio's costume and take him to, leave him webbed up for the cops, and then he takes off. So great punch there. Terrific. Again, you really want to twist that body, twist that arm around, and the shoulders. It's where all the power comes from. He's pushing from this back leg. So if this arm's forward, this arm's back. It's just that counter. What's it called? It's a counter pose. There's a specific term, and I don't want to mess it up, but basically, it's how your body mechanics work. If one arm is forward, you're twisting your shoulder, so the other one has to be back. So to counter your balance, you have to do sort of the same thing, or the opposite thing, with your legs. So if your left arm's forward, your left leg will be back, and again, just counterbalancing you. So that is the end of this awesome issue. So we're going to cut back over to the desk. We're going to wrap things up. So that was Amazing Spider-Man 67, a nice little conclusion to a little 2-story arc of the return of Mysterio. Spidey made short work of that attempt, and man, it's just great. I love this issue. Like I said, it has a feel of a much more modern, and I'll air quote modern, comic with its big panels, open space, large figures, creative panel design, page composition, just really, really awesome stuff. There's very few issues that I found that I would be like, well, this is kind of meh. The story itself is a little hokey. That Mysterio, you thought you could get away with this. It's a little bit of a nutty story. But I suppose it would have been even nuttier if he had actually shrunk him down. But that being said, I mean, for the art of this book, it's a 9 out of 10 for me. This is just phenomenal. I've always gone in like 0.5, so like 8, 8.5, 9. I feel like it's better than an 8.5. Maybe the overall book, because the story's a little wacky, isn't quite a 9. It's somewhere between 8.5 and 9. So we'll give it the first 8.75. So we've increased the range of the grading scale that we've got here. So I think it's awesome. There's so much you can learn here as a comic artist. I highly recommend it. And I just really enjoyed it. And most importantly, I hope you enjoyed it too. This has been a great time. Please let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this review and this look at Amazing Spider-Man 67. And again, as always, don't forget, if you want to have a chance to win free art, don't forget to be a subscriber to the channel. And once you do, one of these and others pieces of original art could be yours for free. So just click that button. And don't forget, we'll see you right here next week, same place, same time, with even more Amazing Spider-Man. Thanks.